Good morning, guys. In previous class we have seen the SOQL, and then we have created some records using for loop and list and map, how to store the values into the list and how to store the values into the map. And we have already seen that performing the DML operation, again it's the subject and list of a subject request, right? We have seen that how to query the records into the list and how to query the records into the map and iterating the map and list. You have seen. So today we are going to discuss the triggers. This is very much important programming in the Apex. In Salesforce, if you want to develop anything, then you should know the triggers. Okay, trigger is the most important part in the Salesforce. Okay, what is a trigger? A trigger is a piece of code which executes when a record is created or updated or deleted or undeleted, whatever it is. Okay, so here trigger will be automated process. Trigger is a piece of code which will be executed automatically. Okay, so as well as we have automated process like workflows, and second one process builders, right? We have these two, but these two will be executed whenever a record is created or updated, right? And the criteria should be true, then only the workflows and process builders will be executed. But in the triggers, unlike the workflows and process builders, triggers will be executed whenever the record is created, okay, or updated, deleted or undeleted. Create, update, delete and undelete. Okay, so usually workflows will be executed once per transaction. Let's say if you have given a workflow evaluation criteria like created, then if you insert a record and criteria is true, then workflow will be executed, otherwise it won't execute, right? The same way triggers will be executed without conditions. There will be no criteria. If you want to execute some business logic based on the conditions, then you need to write the Apex code into the triggers. Okay, now but the difference between the workflows and process builders mostly is the coding is not required in the workflows and process builders. These are just like configurations. But in the Apex, you should know the coding. Apex is completely, in the triggers, you should know the Apex coding. Okay. Now, the important point is, in one transaction, like create or edit or delete or undelete, triggers will be executed twice, but workflows process builders will be executed only once when a record is created or updated. So that's why we can say events, usually events, trigger events. We will be saying that trigger events, that is when you are creating a record, like it is an insertion operation, right? When a record is inserting, then the trigger will be executed twice, like before insert and after insert. And when you are updating the record also, that will be executed twice, before update and after update. Okay, same as well when you are deleting the record, then it will be before delete and after delete. In the case of undelete, it will be only after undelete. There will be no before undelete. Okay, so here on create, like insert, if the DML operation is insert, there will be before insert and after insert. Okay, and then in the case of update, there will be before update and after update. Okay, in the case of delete also, there will be before delete and after delete. Okay, in the case of undelete, There will be only after until it. There will be no before until it. Okay, so here we can say events, before events and after events. Okay, so based on the events we will be saying that before triggers and after triggers. Before triggers means the trigger will be executed twice per transaction for the insert, update and delete. For undelete there will be only one transaction, that is after undelete. But in the case of insert, update, delete, there will be before triggers as well as after triggers. Means the logic which will be executed before insert and the logic which will be executed after insert. Based on that logic, we are dividing the triggers two types, like before triggers and after triggers. That's nothing but based on our requirement we will be writing the trigger. Okay, so then what is the logic should be executed before insert and what is the logic we should be writing for executing after insert or after update or after delete. Okay, so based on that we'll be defining triggers will be two types, that is before triggers and after triggers. Okay, now so where we can have the information. Let's say whenever you are writing a workflow or whenever you are creating a process builder, then you will be having the criteria, like you can select the values or you can select the fields from the drop down, like formula editor, something like this. See, whenever you are editing the workflow or something, then what you can do is you can simply give the criteria by selecting the fields here, right? The record will be there, and whenever the record is created and based on that employee record, the values will be compared in the criteria, right? The same way, if you want to execute the business logic automatically, then you should have the records, whatever you are inserting or whatever you are updating, deleting, undeleting, whatever the records you are doing, then you should be having in your hand, then only you can execute the logic, right? So to hold those type of records into the context, we have some variables that is called trigger context variables. Okay, trigger context variables, this is very much important. What are the trigger context variables? What is the use of trigger context variables? Let's say if you are inserting a record and you want to validate something, right? Then you should write your own logic in the Apex that based on that records which are getting inserted, right? So for inserting or for updating the records, those records should be available in some of the variables to perform some business logic inside the trigger. Okay, so for that we have some context variables like trigger.new. Okay, this is list. Okay, so here what we can say that this is, let me explain the trigger.new. This is like list of yes object. Okay, trigger.new equals to new list of yes object. Here yes object means if you have written a trigger on account, then here instead of yes object it will be account. Okay, if you have written the trigger on contact, then it will be contact. Okay, you don't need to write like this, the syntax is not required. Trigger.new, you can directly use the variable. Okay, trigger is a class, new is a variable. Okay, we can't see the code inside the Salesforce, but trigger is a class and new is a variable. It is a static variable. We know that whenever we were discussing about the classes and other thing, we have seen how to access the static variables, right? Static variables can be used by Apex class name. Like if you see that, if you want to access the variable, if you want to access the static variable, then what you have to do is system.debug, let's say whatever you want, system.debug class a dot a, right? Simple. You can use like this, right? If I have a, instead of integer, if I have a variable which is list data type, that also you can access like class name dot variable name, right? Simply the same way in the trigger context, the trigger dot new is a variable, trigger is a class, and trigger dot new is a variable which is list data type, and that will store the records of which are inserting or updating, deleting the records. Okay, there will be trigger dot new. This is list of SObject records. List of SObject records. Now trigger dot new map. So here we are saying trigger dot new is a list of SObject records. Trigger dot new map is map of records. Okay, map of records. So yesterday we have seen that we have written a program to store the list of records into a map, and that map ID will be the key and record will be the value, right? Simply like map of ID. Let me give the syntax here. This is like simple map of ID SObject, then trigger dot new map equals to new map of ID and then SObject. So this you don't need to worry about the syntax. I'm just giving how this will store the records, right? Here if you are writing a trigger on account, and SObject will be the account, right? And the record ID, whatever account ID stored in the, whatever the record ID is there, that record ID will be the key and that record will be the value. And now if you want to get a record from the map, then you can pass the ID to that and we can get the value of that. Yesterday we have already seen that logic. Okay, then we have trigger dot old. This is also same like trigger dot new, but I'll explain that. List of SObject records. Okay, list of SObject records, and then we have trigger dot old map. Okay, this is map of records. Okay, now these four are very much important trigger context variables, and then we have different other context variables like trigger dot size, and it returns list of size of the list. Okay, size of the list. So let's say if you are inserting 10 records, then list size will be 10. If you are inserting 100 records, and size will be 100, right? Same way, trigger dot is executing. This is, it just give true or false. If the logic is getting executed from the trigger, then it returns true, else it returns false. Okay, then we have to know which event is firing. Let's say if you are inserting the records or updating the records or deleting the records or undeleting the records, you should know in the trigger. Let's say if I want to execute some logic in the case of before insert, then I should know that, right? So that's why we have some other context variables. Is after, it returns true or false. Okay, trigger dot is before. This is also written true or false. Okay, then to check whether, so why we need is after or is before, we need to know the trigger will be running twice per transaction in the case of insert, update, delete. Now I want to run some logic in the case of before insert, then I should know whether it is before trigger or whether it is after trigger. For that we have the context variables like is before and is after. Then I need to know whether it is insert or update or delete. For that we have is insert, it returns true or false. Then trigger dot is update, it returns also true or false. Then trigger dot is delete, this also returns true or false. Trigger dot is undelete, it returns also true or false. Okay, how many trigger context variables we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so these are the important trigger context variables we have to look into, and we should know when the values will be there in the trigger.new and when the values will be there in the trigger.new map and old map, and others how to use that we should know the things. Okay, now we have know that what is new? It is a list of subject record. New map, it is a map of records which are getting inserted or updated or deleted in the trigger context. And old is also the list of records. Old map is also map of records, it stores in the key value pairs. ID will be the key and record will be the value of that. Then size is executing, and is after, is before, is insert, is update, is delete, is undelete. So these are used to control the flow when the logic should be executed. Based on that we can add the conditions. Now how to write a trigger? Trigger syntax. Okay, now here trigger, then trigger name, okay, on object name, s object name, then events. Here you can write your own logic. Okay, your logic. Example is, now if I want to run a trigger on trigger giving the name as account trigger on account events, like whether it is before update, after update, or before delete or after delete, when the trigger should be executed. Let's say if I want to run the trigger before insert, and after insert, or before update and after update, just like comma separated, before delete and after delete and after undelete. So these are the events. We have maximum events, all are covered. Okay, let's write in the same way. And the very much important thing is, you should write only one trigger per transaction, sorry, one trigger per object. Okay, on object, see, let's say here on account, the trigger is there, account trigger is there on the account. You can create any number of triggers, but best practices is you should create only one trigger per object. This is very much important point. Okay, now let's create the trigger on account. Now I'm going to create new Apex trigger. Here you need to give the trigger name, account, trigger. See, whatever the trigger you are creating on which object, based on that object you need to give the trigger name. Let's say if you are creating a trigger on employee, then you need to give employee trigger. If you are creating a trigger on contact, then you have to give the name like contact trigger. Okay, here you need to select the object, account, submit. Okay, now this will automatically create the trigger with syntax. Now you need to give your events here. Here I have given lot of events. You can give all the events, but as your wish. If you want to give all the events, you can give, or if you want to give only some events, you can give it. Apex is not case sensitive. You can use small letters, capital letters, or combination of capital letters and small letters as well. Okay, now here, so what happens? This trigger will be executed only before insert, and it won't execute in after inserts or after update, after before delete. It won't execute anywhere. Means this trigger will execute only before insert. Means it executes only once per transaction in the case of insertion, right? And this trigger won't execute in the before update or after update because the events are not mentioned there, right? For that, what you need to do is you need to copy all the events and keep in the trigger. Okay, I have given all the events here. Okay, now let's see how to get the values which are getting inserted into our list. Okay, now we know that we have already seen that we have the context variables called trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old, and trigger.old map. Right, now let me give, so here list of account, because we have written the trigger on the account, right? So ACCS equals to trigger dot new. Okay, so here trigger dot new will be having the list of records which are getting created, and those will be in the trigger dot new, and we are getting the trigger dot new list records into our own list. Instead of using the direct list, we are storing into our own list called ACCS. We are just printing that. Now let's create one account on this. Here account name trigger test 1. Okay, now let's execute the, I have saved the record, means it is inserted. Now the log will be there. Okay, now if you see that, so usually workflow will execute only once, right? So according to our trigger, it will execute before inserting the record as well as after inserting the record as well. And in other cases this will be true, it is not update, it is not delete, or it is not undelete, so it won't execute, right? Now let's see what will happen. See this, twice it is executed, right? But if you observe that ACCS means before insert ID is null, right? all other values is same. Is delete equals to false, master record ID null, name equals to trigger test 1, type equals to technology partner, parent ID null, building state, everything is same, only the ID is different, right? So the before triggers will be executed first and then after triggers will be executed next. Okay, so in the case of before triggers, ID is null because the record still not inserted into the database. Once the record is inserted, then only the ID will be generated, right? That's why the ID value is null in the case of before insert, and in the after insert the ID is generated, so the values will be in the list. ID is there in this one list. Okay, so as per this one you can understand one thing. In the before insert, ID will not be there. In the after insert, ID will be there. Okay, that is one thing. Now if you see, now I just let's execute the, just edit the record. What is the difference we will see. Okay, if you edit the record, like I am giving 1 1 and instead of prospect, save. Okay, here also see this, ID is there, values are there, everything is there. In the before insert, I mean before update or after update, we have the same values in this one, right? So values are there. Now my intention is to show what are the values will be there in the trigger.new and trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old map in the case of insert, update, delete or undelete. Okay, for that you should understand the logic on how and when the values will be there in the trigger.new and trigger.old and other details. Now here better to note down all the details. Okay, now here events versus context variables. Okay, or let's say events, then events are, what are that? Now let me show that. Before insert, after insert, sorry, let's have the context variables first. Like new means trigger.new, new map, old map, this is enough, and remaining are same, you don't need to worry about that. Here before insert, after insert, before update, then after update, then before delete and after delete, then after undelete. Okay, you need to note down everything clearly. Now let's see what are the values will be there in the trigger.new and new map in the case of before insert and in the case of after update and everything. Now what I am trying to do is, if we have already seen that if the trigger is running in the case of before, then trigger.isBefore will return true and remaining all other variables will return false. Okay, and in the case of after trigger, isAfter will return true and other will return false, right? Now let's see, if trigger dot is before equals to true, we can use like this, right? This is the condition, here it is. So you can use with equals to true if condition, else you can directly use is before, that's it. This is also will give return true or false, that's fine, no issues. Now let me write system dot debug before triggers. Okay, now let me use system.debug of new. What is the values will be there in the trigger.new. System.debug of old. Let's see, new map first. New map, trigger.new map. System.debug of old. Trigger.old. System.debug of old map. Okay, trigger.old map. In the case of, we are printing all the details. Now here is after. Okay, in the case of after trigger, I'm not writing any business logic. I'm just showing the details. What will be the values will be there in the context variables in different events. Okay, you should know that. Okay, now let's create one record. If you are creating, then what will be the meaning? We are inserting a record, and there will be two events, before insert and after insert. Okay, now let's write, I am giving trigger test 2, and values I am giving like prospect. You should be careful on this. Government, and here rating is hot, ownership is public, and country is giving as India. Okay, India. Customer priority low, then SLA equals to silver, and opportunity maybe. Okay, description, insertion, active equals to yes. Now let me execute, just insert. Okay, now if you insert the record, we have a log. Open the log. See this. Now in the before trigger, at line number 7, 8, 9, 10, what are the value in be new? New is having the values. New is having the values which are having the records, trigger test 2, type, and everything. Means the records which are we are inserting, those are in the trigger.new. In the before trigger, before insert, values will be there in the only in the new. New map is null, old is null, old map is there, all are null. Only trigger.new is having the values. Now you should understand that here I am giving the green color for this, means values are there, and for trigger.new map there are no values, right? And trigger.old map and old, both are not having the values, right? And after insert, what are the values we have? See this, after insert we have values in the new and new map, but we don't have in the old and old map. Okay, now here the values there are there in the new and new map, but there are no values in the old and old map. Okay, this is the trigger context variables. Whenever the record is inserted, the values will be there in the new, in the before insert, and the values will not be there in the other context variables like new map, old and old map in the case of before insert, and the values will not be there in the old and old map, and the values will be there in the new and new map in the case of after insert. And I will explain you why we should be very careful in this trigger context variables. I will tell you that. Okay, now So we have seen the just insert, right? Now let's see edit. If you edit the record, now just understand that trigger dot, account name I am giving 22. Okay, type I am giving like other, and government I am giving in the energy, and ownership is giving like subsidiary. Okay, so billing country I am now here I am giving billing country as USA, and shipping country I am not changing that. Okay, now description I am giving like update. Save. And we have already mentioned that there will be before update and after update. We have given two events here, before update and after update. Okay, now this trigger will be executed twice, once in the before and second in the after, right? Now let's see the debug log. So if you observe that in the case of update, before update, there will be values in the new and new map, old and old map. In the case of after delete also, there will be the values in the new map, old and old map. Okay, now let me explain why the difference is there and what is the difference we have. Okay, now if you observe that there are new and old, two lists we have, and new map, old map, two maps we have. So why do we need to store the same records, two lists and two maps? Why do we need it? We can store the list of records into the one list, and if you want map, we can store in a single map. Then why do we need two maps and two lists, right? For that you can understand it. Let's see, whenever you are updating the records, there might be a change in the field values. Currently what we have done, we changed the account name and we have updated some other fields as well, country and other details. Then for comparing those two values, whether it is changed or not, in workflows or process builders we have a function called is changed, right? But how can we compare inside the trigger? Trigger is an Apex code, right? For that comparison we have two list and two map. That's why we are saying that new map, new, and new map, old and old map. Means new means what are the values in the trigger.new. Let's say if you observe that trigger test 22, type is other, then country is something other than details. Let's see. Okay, we have updated some fields values. In the new map also there will be same records, but the difference is key value pairs. Key will be the ID, value will be the record. Other than that, there is nothing difference in the values of the record in the trigger.new and new map. But in the old and old map, if you see this is the old map, old list. See trigger test 2. What were the values previously before updating the record? What are the values were there? Okay, those values and those records will be stored in the old, and the same values are stored in the old map with the key value pairs. Okay, a trigger.new will be always having new set of values, new set of records, and old map will be having the old values which were there before updating the record. What are the values were there, and those values will be there in the old and old map. The same values in the before trigger and after trigger also, the values will be there same. I think now you guys understand the difference between the old and old map, new and new map, and new and old, old and new and old map and new map as well. Do you guys have any doubt on this? Please let me know. Okay, now let's see what will happen in the case of delete. Okay, in the case of delete, if you delete a record, now trigger will be executed twice because we have before delete and after delete, right? Now what are the values will be there? New and new map will always be null in the before delete or after delete. In the case of delete, there will be no values in the new and new map. Okay, and old map will be having the values. See this, new and new map will be null, and old map will be having the values in the case of delete. Okay, now what should happen? What will happen in the case of undelete? Go to the recycle bin, select the record, undelete. Now also the record has been restored, and the trigger has been executed. But here if you see that, which trigger is executed? Only after trigger is executed. And in the after undelete means, in the case of undelete, there will be values in the new and new map, but there will be no values in the old and old map. Okay, now here use new and new map will be having values, and then old and old map will be having null. Okay, here red color means you should not use those variables in these events. Before insert, you should not use the new map, old and old map. You should not use. If use, you will run into exception. In the case of after insert, you should not use old and old map. If you use, you will run into exception. Then before delete and after delete, you should not use new map, new in the before delete and after delete. If you use, you will run into exception. Now let's see what will happen if you use those variables. Now let me say, let's say now I want to run my trigger only in the case of before insert. Okay, now I'm removing everything. Now here I want to run my trigger in the case of before insert. Now I know that the insert operation, whenever the insert operation is performed, the trigger will be executed twice, before insert and after insert. But my logic should be executed in before insert only. Now for that I need to know whether it is executing before or after. For that I have a variable called trigger dot is before, right? And I need to know whether it is insert or update or delete or something, because this logic will be executed before insert, before update, before delete, everything, because we just are using is before only. I need to run the logic only before insert. Now I can have AND condition, then I have trigger dot is insert. Now what will happen? These two conditions are true, then only the trigger will execute the logic which is written inside the if condition, right? So if I want to run the logic to be performed before insert only. Okay, now here I want to see what are the records I am inserting. I need to check the values. Okay, now here we know that how to iterate the list. We have already seen that, right? For that we have two ways, like for trigger dot, for integer I equals to 0, I less than or equals to I less than the something trigger dot size, or let's say list dot size. Now what I'm trying to do is, let's use list of account ACCS equals to trigger dot new. Now here I'm iterating with ACC dot size, ACCS dot size, and then I plus plus. This logic we know, we have already executed this type of thing now, right? Now account A equals to ACCS dot get of I. Okay, now here let's write the debug statement. System dot debug of A is plus A. Okay, now let's write list of account ACC new list of account for integer I equals to 0, or let's say I less than or equals to 5 I plus plus. ACC dot add of new account means I am just inserting some records from the Apex, because I can't insert the multiple records from the user interface, right? To insert multiple records, you can use the import wizard, or you can use the data loader, or if you want to use, you can use Apex as well. I'm giving name equals to ACCS plus I. I'm not giving any other values. Now insert ACC. Okay, now if you insert this record, how many records will be there in the trigger? There will be 5 records will come into the trigger.new, because you are inserting the 5 records. Okay, if you insert 200 records, there will be 200 in the trigger.new. If you insert 500 records, then also there will be 200 records only will be there in the trigger.new. Then next 300 records will come in the different ways. Those are called chunks. Okay, means if you insert 500 records, the trigger will process 200 records at a time. Okay, if you insert 500 records, 200 records first time, second time 200 records, third time remaining 100 records will be executed in the trigger. If you insert 150 records, the size is 200, because the size is 200 and the trigger size is inserting records are less than 200, so at a time the 150 records will be processed. Okay, now here you just try to execute. Now if you observe that this will be executed only once, because we have given the condition to execute only on the before, and that too it is before insert only, right? Now let's execute the logic and let's see the debug log. Here ID is null and records are having this one, but only the name is different: test account 1, test account 2, test account 3, 4, 5, right? This is how it will come. Now let's see what will happen if you use trigger.old. Okay, now you can use this, right, ACCS, but instead of that, this is very basic way of writing the trigger. Now let's optimize the code. Instead of this code, let me write some different code. Anyway, you will be seeing the record video, right? You can understand and you can write down this. Now instead of separating the list into the ACCS, what I'm trying to do is you can use trigger.new.size, and you can get like this. Now this variable is not required, right? Optimizing the code means unnecessary variables we are removing that. Okay, and to know the trigger size, okay, we have one variable, one context variable which is called trigger.size, right? So instead of trigger.new.size, you can use directly trigger.size. This is also will return the same thing. Okay, now let me execute that. Delete of select ID from account where I am removing all the records. Execute highlighted. Some records will not be deleted. Where created date equals to system dot today. Here if you see, accounts will be there, but there will be no, oh, still it is there, today records or account. TRIGG or line number 6. Okay. Okay, now let me execute the same logic. Okay, so this I am going to execute, inserting the records. Same logic will be executed, but there will be no issue. This will be printed same way. Now let's use what happens if you use trigger.old instead of new. Okay, now just use old. Okay, we know that we have the list or we have a matrix. You should not use the other variables other than the new. You should not use any other variable in the context of trigger dot, in the context of before insert. In the before insert you should not use any other variable other than the new. Let's execute the code. Let's write C and there will be exception. Okay, here the record is inserted because not that, let me this is not saved. Now let's execute this. See this exception. Okay, so the exception is null pointer exception. Okay, this null pointer exception because you should not use the old in the before insert. Okay, now here instead of writing this for loop, you can use other for loop like enhanced for loop as well to iterate the list of records. So here if I use like this, account A trigger dot new, this you have to know that. Now here I don't want to get this one, I'm using this way. Okay, this also will give the same results. Now if you use trigger.old, it will run into the same issue, right? The exception will be there, but I don't think there will be thing. Let's execute this action. Exception is there, so only you should use only trigger.new in the case of before insert. The same way other variables also. In the case of after insert, you can use new map, but you should not use old and old map. But in the case of before update and after update, you can use any variable whatever you want. Okay, in the case of delete, before delete or after delete, you should use only old and old map. You should not use new and new map. If you use, then there will be null pointer exception. Again, in after delete, you can use trigger new and new map only, but you should not use old and old map. Okay, that's very much important things. Now let's use these things. Now I want to show the different names. I want to access the different fields from the object. Now I want to know name. I can give like a dot name. If I want to give some type, then I can use system dot debug of. Here you can use like a plus symbol, then space, then a dot type. You can access like this, right? So you can display and you can do this one as well. Now let's use, I want to throw some validation message. Whenever I'm creating a record, I want to throw the validation message. If the type is null, then I have to throw the error message. Okay, now if you want to create a new record, I don't have any validation rule, but through the triggers I can validate the records as well. Means I can throw the error message. Okay, now what I'm trying to do is, if type is none, means if type is not selected, then I want to throw the error message. That error message throwing should perform only in the before triggers. It should not be in the after triggers. Okay, now here what I'm trying to do, if okay, a dot type equals to this one, means null. Now I want to throw the error message like a dot add error of please select account type. This means whenever you are writing the validation message, if you want to throw the error message and it should be displayed on the top of the page, then you can use a dot add error message. Now before inserting, I am entering the company name, but I am not entering the type. If you throw the see this, okay, sorry, I think we used old, right? We need to use new only. Okay, now let's say, oh, a dot type is before is insert and type equals to let's use some other method. String dot is blank. It should always work. A dot type. If it is blank, if it is null, it will return the true. Then if you want, now create a new account. Try this. Please select account type. Now if I want to throw the error message at the field level, then what you need to do is a dot type dot add error. Okay, now try to save. Now the error message is displayed on the field level. Okay, so this is how the basic trigger will be there. Okay, now other thing is, in the before, here it is, we have how to iterate the trigger dot new map. That is also the point, right? In trigger dot, I mean in the case of after insert, we can iterate the new map, but if you use the map in the before insert, then it will run into the issues, right? That's why we are running is after. I am running like this. Now we know that we can get all the keys into the set, and we have already iterated using the set in the previous class. The same way you can use for id I. Why we are using id? Because in the trigger.newMap there will be id and record key value pairs. Okay, trigger dot new map. This is map only dot key set. Okay, here what I'm trying to do is I am iterating the list. System dot debug of A is plus trigger dot new map dot get of I. Logic to perform after insert. Okay, or whenever you want, even in the before update, after update, you can use the same. Okay, now let's see what is the error. Okay, here it is, and here it is. If condition, then what else we need to do? Okay, now if you want, whenever you are inserting a record, give the prospect save. Now the validation is true, it's not returning any error. Now go to the log section, see that. See, account A is executed. Okay, if you want to know where it is executed, at line number 19 of the trigger. What is the line number 19? This is the line number 19. Okay, so this is how you have to execute the things. Okay, now see, if the type is blank, then if I want to set a value, okay, if type is blank, then I have to set like default as a prospect. Okay, this we can perform through the workflows as well, but how to perform through the triggers? Now if type is this, instead of throwing the error message, I am assigning a.type equals to prospect. Okay, now what will happen? It checks whether the type is null or not. If it is null, it will assign prospect. Okay, now try this. Let me insert a new record. Okay, just use save. Now here if you observe that type is prospect. This is how we have to set the values in the here. Now this is the logic we are using, right? Now let me remove this. You can use this later. What will happen if you use the same logic in the after trigger? Okay, now here what I'm trying to do is, instead of is before, if I use is after, okay, what will happen? Now you should throw the error message in the before triggers, and you should set a value for a field in the before triggers only. You cannot use after triggers to set a value. If you can use to throw the error message in the after triggers also, but if you want to set a value to a field, that should be used in the before triggers only. You should not use after triggers. Okay, if use, what will happen? Let me use this for your understanding. Let me remove is insert, and I am using is update. Okay, you can use, means this will execute only in the case of update and before after update only. Now here let me remove none, try to save. Now it is throwing the exception called record is read only, means you should not set any value to the record in the after triggers. It should be always in the before triggers only. Okay, now try to save. See, this type has been set. Okay, this is how you have to practice the trigger. Now let's give the task. Any doubts on this? Now here write a trigger on employee and display the trigger context variables in all events. In all events means before insert, after update, before insert, after insert, before update, after update, and before delete, after delete, and after undelete as well. Then write a trigger on employee object and iterate all the context variables in all events. Means we use it just now like uh, iterating, right? For using for loop, we have iterated trigger.new and trigger.old and trigger.new map. We have iterated like that. You need to iterate all trigger.new and new map, old and old map in all cases, like before insert, before update, after update, before delete and after delete, as well as after undelete as well. Then throw the error message. Write a trigger on contact and A. Means in the same trigger you need to implement all of these. Validate and throw means throw an error message if the account ID is null. And second one, in the contact what are the values we have? Then here set the country as India if the country is empty. See. Throw error message if the department and email are empty. If both are empty, then you need to throw the error message. Means you have to use AND condition. D. Throw error message if the last name contains test. Means if name is contains test, then you have to throw the error message. Then fourth trigger is now here DE. Now here delete is not allowed if the last name, or let's say if the country is India. Means you have to write the trigger context variable like you have to throw the error message if the record is getting deleted and if the country is India. It should be done in the before delete. Okay. and fourth one. Okay, so that's enough. These triggers you need to execute, and you have to send me the code through my email or in the WhatsApp group. You just write the triggers and show me that. Not in the WhatsApp group, send me personally. Okay, then we can see what it is.